rest at the pulse of the community, providing all things news, music, fashion, events, and everything that we talk about in between. It's a lifestyle. We are the culture.
Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of The Culture. I'm your host, Jessica Garrett Motkins, and joining us today is Brian Courtney Wilson. Thank you so much for joining The Culture, Brian.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
I have so much to ask, but first I'll be remiss if just didn't touch on the current state of the world. We're still dealing with COVID. How are you and your family doing?
I said we take it one breath at a time. Blessed and thankful, all things considered. That's where we try to stay all the time. So we've been pretty good. How
Okay.
about you?
We're good. We're good. We're all in our house, my husband and I, and our two children, and we're finding out more and more and more stuff about each other during this time as we spend
Mm.
intimate time together. What
Yeah.
are you doing to pass the time?
I don't know that past the time is even a luxury I have right now. We just finished our new album, and so now we're just wrapping up. Like I'm working on a devotional today to to go alongside with the record. We've been taping this new show called Breathe Again, where I've been doing interviews on Thursdays and then transferring to a radio show that we're doing on Sundays from 12:30 to 1:30. And so, and oh, you know what? I've been learning graphic design, so I can
Nice.
make flyers and stuff like that. So it's been pretty cool, but I don't know that I can say I've had time to pass, to be honest.
You've been working.
Yeah.
You've
And it's,
been
you
working.
know, but it doesn't feel like work all the time. It just feels like, yo, this is really cool to have this opportunity, even with all the circumstances going on in the world, to hear from God clearly on what you want to do and do it. Have the resources to get it done. So that's been cool about this.
Yes, that's great. I want to take you back to the beginning of your career.
Mhm.
How in the world did you go from corporate America to Beyonce's daddy and signing with Matthew Knowles? How did how
Mhm.
how does that happen?
I say it was grace. It was God's grace and favor, of course, and um, I always had this pull on me, and in hindsight, I knew since I was a child. Since I was playing on my parents' stoop, like we were having talent shows in the front of the house, that I was called to do this type of do music and to be an artist. Um, but I didn't pursue it fully when I was younger, and so when I think about the providence of God and how, when I was in corporate, my territory was in the same place where, like you mentioned, Matthew Knowles' record label was. So I would go see my doctors, my clients, and walk right past his studio all the time there in downtown Houston. And then the church that hired me to do worship music for them, that was like right around the corner. And so all of it was like before I had a plan, God had a plan. He had positioned me to be in that setting and to have that chance to work with him. So it really was God's grace and favor on my life. That's how it happened. But I had to take a step. And I want to say that to your listeners, like ultimately you do have to take a step of faith. You're gonna have to take the leap. And there were days I was terrified of doing it for the same reason that you are inferring in your intonation when you say, "How did you go from corporate to doing that?" I was afraid to do it because I was so, you're comfortable. You're comfortable with your. You get a check on the first and the 15th. You get a bonus. They give you a card. They give you types of things that you think, okay, these are marks of success. These are um, reasons to believe that you're on the right path. But I never could shake this feeling that I had to do something more. I never could shake it. And so to answer your question, long story short, I took a leap of faith and the Lord honored it.
That's great. That's great. And we're able to reap the benefits of you being faithful. There are many things that happen in our life that changes the trajectory of it. People are going through change right now because of COVID. They're being forced to change and go from one chapter to the next chapter. So I thank you for being transparent on being, questioning your steps, but honoring the feeling and what you knew in your Noah, as my pastor would say, that you had to do, and being faithful and honoring God's unction that He placed in you.
When
Um,
you say in your Noah, is that like Noah that built the ark? Is that what you mean?
No, it's the
What is
Noah
Noah?
on the inside of you that tells you things that you are supposed to do when other people doubt what it is that you're doing. So I guess it could be likened to Noah, and I believe that there is an analogy between the two. But he just says, like, in your Noah.
I
Yeah,
like it. I
yeah,
like it.
yeah.
Look,
How did the collaboration with Jonathan McReynolds come about with the song "Make Room"?
his people reached out, and my son was already a huge fan of Jonathan McReynolds, and I am too. He's from Chicago. I'm from Chicago. It's like I understand where he's coming from. When I heard his music, I just got it. And so when he reached out, it was a no-brainer to me. Like, yeah, we'll help out. Just just I get a lot of gratification from working with people that my son likes. Say, hey, yeah, your pop know him. I could do that. So that's how it happened.
Gives you those points, those brownie points.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned this earlier. You have your fifth studio album coming out on October the
Mhm.
16th, entitled "Still." It is so thoughtful. It's very timely as where we are right now in the world. Was that a part of your intent in being able to put it out now?
Yeah, absolutely. I always want to, if we can, um, offer something that's gonna help. I know my primary motivation as an artist and as a minister right now is to encourage, to esteem people, to keep their head lifted, so they know where their help comes from. And so, prayerfully, when people hear "still," they hear that and they recognize it as valuable in that regard. So it's definitely done with intention.
How long did this take?
We we started like right before the quarantine, recording the first single "Still," um, and we're able to finish during the quarantine. So we finished, I guess, about 3 weeks ago with the record,
Wow. Wow.
and we were able to do a lot of stuff remotely. I say this was like one of the hardest records I ever had to do, but it also was the most gratifying because it stretched me and it made me stronger in areas, and it kind of showed me what we already had sitting around. I just didn't use it because I thought there was a certain way you needed to do it. And so in that regard, it was strengthening. And I see it as like an analogy for what you're talking about with this quarantine. I think confinement, if you focus on it the right way, will show you some things that you may have missed um, as you were out. Because you had the freedom to move. Well, now that you don't have as much freedom, now you got to make what you have around you work, and that's what we got out of this experience. And I think that's available for a lot of people through this quarantine as an opportunity to reorient and refocus and see what's right in front of you to make it happen.
Mhm. And this summer, you had a cover of Marvin Gaye's song "Inner City Blues." What was it like covering legendary artist Marvin Gaye?
Man, I'll be frank, it was I had some trepidation because what you don't want to do is do something and then make people want to go listen to like, yeah, it's okay, let me go listen to the old one. You want to add to the conversation. So I was pleasantly pleasantly surprised actually at the response, to be honest, from people saying, "Oh man, I'm so glad you did it." I would get calls from people that have, served in the war even, and said, "Man, I'm so glad you redid the song." And so that made it worth it to me, especially given the why. We put the song out. Um, when the unrest around George Floyd's murder was happening, and we were just trying to figure out, okay, what should we put out now? How do we respond to what's happening right now? And it just seemed like the best thing to say, lamentably, because after 50 years, close to 50 years, the song is still relevant. You don't have to change a lyric, and it still is relevant to today. And so it felt like the right thing to do. Talking to ministers too, even, they reminded me of how it's a lament and how we need to grieve, and that's part of spiritual formation, is having this opportunity to grieve when things are bad. Um, but we don't just grieve; we grieve with a sense of hope. Like, we know that when we cry out, we know that the Lord hears us. The Lord will not let us settle for the blues. That's what this gospel is all about. There's so much good news to be shared and to partake in. But there are still things that are lamentable going on in our society. And it's okay to speak up about it, to say something, to cry out about it. In fact, you must, because these mountains require the power of God to intervene, I believe, before they move. But you got to start with at least being real about it. Like, yo, this is not right. And that's what inner city blues speaks to.
It transcends. Awesome. It was a great job. I tell you, I
Thank you.
listened to your album, and it was this one song I couldn't get past. Had to keep rewinding it, keep rewinding it. That was waiting. I'm sitting here listening to this song, and you're talking about your dreams are waiting on you. And then you got to this part that said, I prayed for this moment, but forgot I prayed for it.
Yeah, man.
I had to
Yeah.
call my husband and I was like, baby, you gotta listen to this because that happens. I mean, you're so entrenched in it and you forget what you've been praying for, waiting for, fasting for, tithing for. You forget. Oh, your whole album is just rhema word after rhema word for my life. I am thankful for it. Do you realize how you are an instrument of hope and just a friendly reminder of God's unchanging hand?
Let me let me say a couple things. I didn't know that you had heard the album, because
Oh,
I know we've done interviews, and I'm so glad that you heard the record. And I'm glad that you dig it. And I'm glad that you pointed to that song, because that's one of my favorites too. That's one my wife, she hears it. She cries every time she hears it, because I think we all have had circumstances like that where either we waiting on something to happen that we could make happen, we just didn't do it, or we in the middle of what we prayed for. It just I I I have a pastor, he says the promised land, was filled with milk and honey, but that really meant it had bees and cows. And you had to go in there and get the work done. You know what I'm saying? It was available to you, but you had to go make it happen. You had to go nurture it.
mhm.
And so that's why I love that song. And I think that's how we make it. That's how we're gonna get past this. As dark as some of these circumstances seem, I think that if you still have breath in your body, that's God still voting on you and saying, "Hey, man, I'm gonna give you a gift that you can use to manifest the miraculous. I'm giving you a gift you can use to manifest the dreams that are in your heart. And not only that, these dreams are gonna help the world. But if you try to figure out how, you'll miss it. So just take this breath and do the best you can with it. Do the best you can with it unto the Lord. And so that's part of what this song speaks to. That's what the whole record is about. Being still in the face of these challenges, not inactive, but focused. Focused on your assignment, focused on the things that you can control, focused on what you know you've been given instruction on, and our enemy is more than willing to distract you from. Believing that if you stay focused on your assignment, the Lord is going to get the glory. And that glory is going to manifest in a way that could change the world, at least change your family, your community. And that's how you change the world. At least change your neighbor. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Still,
Yes.
still.
So
So I'm so glad you got a chance to hear it,
I
and I'm glad you dig it.
yes. Yes. But I love your music, so I wasn't surprised.
Thank you.
I just wasn't surprised at all of the tracks that really resonated with me. I but that one, matter of fact, when we finish, I'm gonna have to go ahead and throw that back on again.
Yeah, I really like that song too. I just and shout out to Eric Roberson who initiated that idea and sent it to me and trusted me to run with it, man. Just I just loved its perspective,
Mhm.
you know,
Mm.
how it it circles back to us and our responsibility in this and what we need to do to move forward.
That's a key point, responsibility, because many times people are asking of God and not understanding that, for lack of a better way to describe it, you have some skin in the game. There are
Mm,
things that you have to do, and if at a minimum, it's not to change your expectation. I'm sorry, change your expectation and
mhm.
wait with expectation and prepare for it too, then you're missing it. You're miss-
You're missing it, man.
I love
It's the
faith.
only way it's the only way to please God is with your faith. That's
Yes,
the only way.
I love it. I don't I was kind of, I guess, kind of made a little different because I get off on that. I get off
Mhm.
on the unknown and then going, God's gonna do it. God's gonna do it. I scared my husband with that when we first got married. And he was like, Jessica, like you're a little too radical about this for me. But after 15 years, he's kind of figured me out. And he mentioned it last night he said, no, but I know how you are with God about your faith. I just expect him to. And I love him for that. I'm also very grateful of this time and for him allowing you to minister to us through music with such timely messages. I am thankful. I'm very thankful. Now, earlier in the
Thank you.
show, you mentioned some TV and radio. Can you let our viewers in on how they can see these interviews that you have or hear the radio
Yeah.
initiative that you have going on?
So, the first thing we've been doing is called Breathe Again. It's like a conversation series I've been having on Thursday nights. You can catch us on Facebook Live, Brian Courtney Wilson on Facebook Live, and I'm gonna start streaming it on YouTube Live as well. You can catch it there. And just it's just me sitting down with people who I dig, you know. So this week, I haven't announced it yet, but Jason Nelson, Bishop Jason Nelson, is gonna sit down with me. We've had Bun B come on. I had Warren Campbell come on and just talk about their faith, anything from their faith or how they got started. And uh, we had the co-founder of Girl Trek on last week. I don't know if you've heard of Girl Trek, but she came on and just talked about their mission and what they're doing right now in terms of voter registration and teaching people about Black history while they walk it out one step at a time in the neighborhoods. It's just the things that I've seen that are beautiful to me, and I've kind of wanted to get in and lean into it closer and have them talk about what they're drawing from, especially during this time, in the interest of us breathing again with expectancy, and not just that, helping your brother do the same thing, helping your sister do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Believe, hey man, you don't have to just hold on and wait for what's next. Breathe deep and make what's next happen. You make it happen. Uh, and then on Sundays from 12:30 to 1:30, I've connected with my mentor Rudy Rasmus, who broadcast a radio show from the church basement. And so he's like, "Hey man, you need to come put a show on the station." And I was like, "Well, let's call it Breathe Again." So he gives me an hour to do anything from share these interviews to sharing artist tips. Like this past week, we talked about professionalism and what it means to be a professional in this business. To just whatever is on my mind. He's just kind of trusting me to do that. And this has all been since the quarantine, you know. And some of this stuff he was asking me to do, and some of the stuff was in my heart to do before the quarantine. And like I said, circumstances have dictated where I had to like really focus on, okay, if all I have left is this last breath, what am I gonna do with it? And these are two of the things I wanted to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being obedient. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being
Thank
obedient.
you, and pray for me because
I
I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I'm just taking it one I'm just taking it one day at a time, with this stuff.
well, it
But
does,
I've enjoyed it. It's been so much. It's been so gratifying. I'm not, I just really dug it. Letting people, the best thing is the people telling me, man, I'm glad you invited me. Like Bun B said, he was like, people don't typically ask me about this stuff, you know, because of who I am or whatever. You helped me just to get it off, just to say what I had to say and what was on my heart. So that's what's cool too, is giving not just the audience a chance to breathe again, but our guests a chance to breathe again.
right.
So that's been dope.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate.
Hope I wasn't rambling on too much.
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay, good.
Not at all. I want to remind everybody October the 16th still will be available on all platforms. Brian Courtney Wilson, thank you again for joining us. And we will
And you
see.
can pre-order it too. I don't know when it's gonna air, but you can pre-order it this Friday, October 2nd, and
Okay.
get the single still. And
And then where
man, I
do they
can't
go
yeah.
to pre-order it? On all the platforms as well?
Oh yeah, all digital platforms wherever music is sold.
Okay. Okay. Thank you
Yep.
so much. Much success, sir. We appreciate you. And thank you
Thank you
all
for
for,
listening.
huh?
Thank you for listening for real. I
Yes,
appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you all for joining us again for another episode of The Culture. You can catch us tonight at 6 p.m. for My Two Cents. We appreciate you and we'll see you next time.
The Culture is produced and owned by Hip Rock Star Media and cannot be reproduced or broadcast without written consent by Jessica Garrett Motkins. All rights reserved 2020.